All right, all right, all right. Welcome back to the GSMC Wrestling Laureate Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just to kind of reiterate what we talked about, segment one was talking about WWE NXT. And segment two, we talked about how AEW is. We talked about AEW and Dynamite. We also talked about the possibility of superstars maybe jumping ship, jumping from this Titanic, hitting an iceberg. But like I said before, I hope they're doing okay. But so it is clear, is AEW fading? I think it is. I hate to admit it, and I really hope it doesn't happen. But I don't know. AEW Dynamite sales has been went down in 2024. That just makes you think that, is it thanks to WrestleMania? Is it thanks to the Paul Levesque error? And that's the reason why AEW can't move tickets. So I don't know, that's pretty crazy. Like, you have to really respect AEW, because AEW got off to a hot start back in 2000, and I think they got a hot start in 2020 because it was just the same product going on with WWE. But it was kind of like, just like a change, kind of like something. And I know that because I watch wrestling, night in and night out. I was like, oh, okay, here we are. It's predictable. And it was like something hot and something fresh that wrestling fans desperately needed. They desperately needed AEW, and WWE desperately needed AEW to kind of get their head out of their ass and be like, look, like, something needs to change here. We need to compete with these guys. Like, they're not just some small promotion from the Jim Crockett, organization. They're actual players and stuff like that. So that's why you kind of have to respect AEW. Um, and I thought it was pretty crazy how I feel like I'm really strong. I really have that strong belief that they picked up on Vince's tendencies. That's the reason why they kind of had that hot start, and why they were kind of wrestling fans alternatives to like a more better organization or like entertainment value. But because you have to think about it. Like, now you have Paul Levesque, the Paul Levesque era. He's unable to predict. Obviously, he wrestled for the longest time. They're able to cut better promos, storylines, promotions, better weekly shows, etc. Like, it's crazy. And WWE signed a massive streaming deal with Netflix for WWE Raw. So that's going to also, kind of accumulate into the reason why AEW might fall. And you have a $5 billion deal over 10 years, possibly 15 years. Like, that's insane. That probably the biggest thing ever. And with Netflix kind of, not, kind of being like, hey, honestly, if you want to push it to PG-13, we can do that. And Netflix, one thing I give really, real quick, one thing I really give props to Netflix is that their ability to kind of center around not just high end box office like Hollywood movies. You kind of have movies from all over the country, like from Bollywood, from Nollywood. You have things from Nigeria, like films that are really good films. And a lot of people just be like, "Oh, I just want to see like things you see in movie theaters and stuff like that." But just give it a shot. Like, I took a cinema class in college, and I was not forced. It was the curriculum to watch like 10 movies, and to be honest, I watched it. Like, that's Asian cinema, like I said, Nigerian, Bollywood, like Nollywood. Like, it was good stuff. It was good stuff. So expand your mind a little bit. But moving on, they signed a massive deal. Obviously, you kind of have to be, with the executives leaving AEW, that kind of leaves talent. They took a $34 million loss in 2023, so that's huge. And it kind of makes you to think that, well, with AEW struggling right now, and with WrestleMania 40 being the best WrestleMania of all time, did WrestleMania 40 finally put that nail in the coffin for AEW? Like I said, I'm not trying to pick on him, and I really hope that it didn't. But it's crazy. And even prior to the Netflix deal, WWE had talks with moving to WBD, which is Warner Brothers Discovery, which they would have aired on Turner television networks like TNT and TBS, which would have been absolutely detrimental for AEW. So, obviously, I hope it doesn't happen, but something's going down, guys. Something going down. I don't know. And there's been just recent talks that AEW really hopes that they want to use a ranking system. They want to use a ranking system in order to bring back fans. And and I think that's obviously you get to the point where you're like you're willing to try anything, but I don't think this is the right thing to do. I read an article by Alfred Kanua at Forbes magazine, and he put it right. He put it absolutely right. He said AEW doesn't need a ranking system; it needs star power. It absolutely needs star power. And you got to, that's absolutely right. You lose Cody Rhodes, MJF to injury, Sting retiring, like CM Punk gone due to, organizational problems where Nick Khan was afraid to step in and do anything about a situation. And honestly, you kind of look at these recent signings and you're like, well, that explains a lot because you had Mercedes Moné, you had Will Ospreay, Matt Cardona, and then now you have Chris Jericho, going, turning face and stuff like that. These are all, I feel like, the acts of a desperate man. And like, I'm not dogging on the guy, but honestly, I don't think Tony Khan can run a business. He's part of the board in the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I know this has nothing to do with wrestling, but the Jacksonville Jaguars started off hot, and then they took a and it's just like, sometimes you can be a boss and sometimes you can run an organization or sometimes you're not. Like, but comparing apples to oranges here. But moving on, just kind of finishing this off. So can AEW stay alive? Or will it end up like WCW? Just because they were on the same channels as WCW doesn't necessarily mean they're the same brand. Like the good thing about AEW was Tony Khan teamed up with other wrestlers to create from scratch its own entity, which is pretty cool. That's pretty hot. Ted Turner bought a wrestling company that was already built, the Jim Crockett promotion, which was already currently airing on TBS in 1988. Turner was able to buy the company and ultimately create World Championship Wrestling. So, that's pretty cool. And you also have to think about it in this way that when Ted Turner bought Jim Crockett and created WCW, the ingredients that made JCP, Jim Crockett's promotions, were kind of already in place. You kind of had Ric Flair, you had the Four Horsemen, you had Dusty Rhodes, you had Sting, you had all these guys that already had a huge fan base around them, all ready to go. So, and AEW, they still struggle to this day. Even like it's crazy. Like I read this article and I was like, wow, that's the reason why AEW has, they don't really have a huge library such as the WCW or Jim Crockett or even the NWA. Like it's crazy. But all AEW really has is their own shows. You have AEW Dynamite, you have Rampage, you have Collision, and then even on YouTube they have shows like AEW Dark Evolution, and I don't know. That's just kind of crazy because I feel like for the longest time I thought to myself, I was like, damn, these guys are wrestling like 3 or 4 or 5 shows a week. Like that's crazy. And it's just to build up this video library, this able to like where you kind of type into a search engine like Hulk Hogan or Sting or Bret Hart, and like you just have all these things pop up, and it's just to kind of put your name synonymous with the most like searched wrestler, which is why they got Mercedes Moné, Will Ospreay, and et cetera, Bryan Danielson and CM Punk. But the only thing that I kind of, Tony Khan compares to Vince as he likes to kind of micromanage. Like instead of letting people kind of be creative minds in the field, kind of like Eric Bischoff, Vince Russo in WCW and the Attitude Era. And it just kind of leads to the demise of organizations. Like look at the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of people believe that the Dallas Cowboys aren't a good franchise and they are on the they're on the balance beam of going over because Jerry Jones is constantly micromanaging. He's like you see the guy in press conferences. Like, do they interview Mike McCarthy after a loss? No, they're going to talk to Jerry Jones. And sometimes, like, you got to let people do their thing, man. And that's ultimately, that's why I believe the Dallas Cowboys are terrible right now, is because that Jerry Jones is obviously he's an influence, but we'll move more in that, when we, this isn't a football podcast. We have a football podcast with my boy Kenneth. Check it out on the GSMC Sports Network. And it's crazy how WCW was kind of built on former stars like Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Kevin Nash, etc., etc. And AEW should be admired because they, like I said, they built it from scratch. Where they had Cody Rhodes, they kind of had John Moxley, Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, and then you had the Young Bucks as well as Hangman Adam Page and Kenny Omega to kind of carry that, kind of carry that brand, kind of carry that thing while they kind of we're ready to rumble with Vince McMahon. So we're running out of time here, but hopefully I can get done with my first segment. It's gonna be pass or draft. I'm gonna be talking about AEW, Ring of Honor, New Japan Wrestling, Impact stars that could possibility jump ship from the teetering, from the Titanic sinking of the Tony Khan promotions and kind of make the jump into the WWE draft. So hey, don't go anywhere.